I'm sharing today in my role as the project coordinator of a project called Build the Truce. And that's a project that looks at contemporary conflict cycles and aims to pull in as broad a range of perspectives as possible on the themes that we cover. And part of that is a blog that we've currently got going. It's up behind you. Until June, that blog is focused on the Baghdad car and the meaning and the interpretation of that car, because we think it's a very useful starting point for discussions around contemporary conflict. It's a single object with a lot of meaning and a lot of symbolism and connotation, I think, Roger, is what we were discussing earlier. So in the context of that blog, we've dug around for quite a lot of information and context, some of which is available on the gallery as touchscreen and some of which is not, so because it's a finite amount that you can put out on the gallery. I would recommend that you have a look at this blog after the event today, and I would very much value your feedback and comments on the car, its presentation, and on this event. We've invited speakers today who feature in significant stages of the Baghdad car's journey from Baghdad to this museum. It's unfortunate that we're missing today Robert Clerver, Dutch activist, who we had invited to appear here today and is not able to attend through no suspicious circumstances, but he's not able to attend in person. To my left, Roger Tolson, who is the head of collections at the Imperial War Museum based in London and braved the train journey to join us today. And to my right, Jeremy Deller. I think you're probably aware of who Jeremy is. Information behind me on the blog relating to Jeremy's role in the life cycle of the Baghdad car. And there will be opportunity for you to ask more specific questions to both those colleagues later on in the day. I just want to be clear that the context that we would like to direct the discussion in today is towards the Baghdad car and its meaning and presence and presentation, which is not necessarily the same thing, in the main exhibition space here in Manchester and at the museum generally. Fairly interested in that, and it's in public perception of that object in a museum space. And in order to interrogate that, we will want to look at the chain of events that links Baghdad, the Baghdad origins of that car, to this museum and to its audiences. And it's probably worth my mentioning that from the museum point of view, and Roger, please correct me if I'm alarmingly wrong, part of our intention in presenting that car is to represent civilian experience of contemporary conflict.
The meaning of it is what happened to it, really, for me, so it's pretty straightforward. Originally I wanted to put a car like this, or this car, on the fourth plinth at Trafalgar Square, and and I wasn't allowed to, well, I wasn't allowed, it wasn't, didn't win that part of the competition, but that's the starting point for me, because I just thought people should see things like they should be seen, and a museum is a very good place to see things like this, or for people to experience things like this.
The atrium in London is just full of these very polished and yet extraordinarily, potentially destructive machines. So for me, this was an opportunity to a solution to how to, as it were, undermine that particular space.
In some ways, perhaps, the item's not different from so much else that we've stolen from the world around us and stuffed our museums with over centuries. You know, how much was paid for the car? Did the owner of the car, whose car was destroyed, was he ever recompensed for that in some way?
Good question. And I think, if I'm absolutely honest, I don't know. And it was one of the issues we faced and had to deal with in quite a short space of time, because the car was on tour as part of Jeremy's project in the States. And a couple of weeks before the exhibition closed in Chicago, Jeremy had been saying, look, the car is going to be destroyed, do you want it? Nobody else wants it in America. And I listened to this and couldn't quite, you know, I'd never really taken it in, because I just assumed that somebody out in the States would want to take it on and own it. But it proved that wasn't the case. It was heading towards a scrapyard. So in 2 weeks we had a very rapid decision to make. Do we acquire this? And what degree of certainty do we have about how it was originally acquired from the how was it, what was the process by which it ended up in the States. So it wasn't a great deal of time to do a great deal of digging, and what we came up with was there was a very clear trail from the point at which it left Baghdad and been used in the Netherlands and in America, so that's straightforward. But what was also evident was the point to which it arrived at the, I think it was the DHL warehouse in Baghdad airport, was going to be a difficult history to follow. What we do know is that the Dutch team employed journalists on the ground in Baghdad who did the negotiations. The car had been salvaged or taken from the bombing, taken to a salvage yard to be to undergo some sort of forensic inspection, but given the number of cars that were coming through, they weren't doing all of them. We're pretty sure that it came from Almerton Abbey Street, though there's a very big warehouse and was always a possibility they lost the trail of things. Once permits had been signed to release it from the warehouse, it then had to negotiate, it had to be brought across Baghdad and through various areas that were all controlled by different factions. So it's just a very complicated journey. We know that it wasn't the first choice of the cars that the Dutch curators wanted. Originally they wanted the vehicle in which the actual bomb had been detonated. But that wasn't possible because that was actually going to be examined for forensic reasons. And they did also want, there was another car where the owners were known, and they tried to negotiate with the owners about buying the car. But that proved to be too difficult to go through. In fact, the owners wanted to put a value on it which the curators felt wasn't realistic or wasn't affordable from their point of view. So actually the fact that we don't, the reason we, if there had been an identified owner, we might not have got the car. The fact there isn't an identified owner leaves us as a museum at risk, that people might walk through the door and say, actually that's my Ford.
It would be quite similar to Lord Elgin's argument.
Yeah, but our yeah. No, but our position is, and the point we got to was, we thought it's worth taking the risk. And if somebody does come up and can legitimately show that it is their car, we'll hand it back. We're not, we're not going to, what's interesting about it is, although it might have a value as scrap, nobody has wanted it at the end of each phase of the project.
For me personally, really, it was taken across the US on the back of a trailer. It was towed across the US with an Iraqi national and an American soldier, and we just parked up in towns and cities and just spoke to the public about it, and we presented it in a pretty neutral is a very loaded word, but in a kind of bland way really, just having it on the back of a trailer. And not really, I mean, I learnt more. I think what I learnt more about the situation. I didn't really learn more about the car, but I learnt more about the context of Iraq itself, just by being with this Iraqi citizen for a month basically. So I learned a lot more about that. So, but the car itself remained as it always was to me, to be honest, as an object. It was a very random process really, because you park up somewhere and anyone can pass by. You have no control over your environment. But we had a lot of very long discussions with people that went on for hours and hours, who were just stats. Really, A, they'd never seen a vehicle like this in their country, and B, they'd never met an Iraqi or an Iraqi on these terms before. Maybe if they'd been in the army, they'd met Iraqis, but not on any terms of equality. So that, I think, was the most surprising thing about how long people took and how much they wanted to talk about things, even if they didn't necessarily agree with what might have been our views on the invasion or the war or sanctions and so on, but they were very interested in what they were seeing in front of them and who they were meeting. And if anything, the people that were most difficult with us were anti-war people, because we weren't being, in their eyes, being anti-war enough in the way we were presenting it.
I think the fact that it is a car is relevant, and we have people from London saying it's far easier to relate to a car than a submarine.
There are these very strict guidelines for news coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So instead they just show the wrecks of cars, burnt out cars and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way the car has become this replacement for an image of the body. So there was, I think when we see a blown up car we think of people's bodies as well. We think of dead bodies. So in my mind at least. So that was another reason to have a car, because you can't fill a war museum with just tons of bodies, but you can fill it with destroyed cars and things that would suggest death. I tried to sort of retreat from it as individually, because I didn't want it to be seen as an artwork, because an artist had been involved in the project. And that's very difficult actually to do that. At a lot of levels people want that kind of involvement of art because it legitimizes it, but actually I think it takes away, if anything, it takes away meaning from it rather than adds meaning. So that for me was the most difficult part of it.
Have you never regarded it as an artwork?
No, it never was.
Roger, have you ever regarded the car as an artwork?
I could argue that the acquisition and the display is some sense an art project, but the car is not an artwork.
But it seemed to be the place where it should be. It shouldn't be in an art museum, but it should be in a museum that deals with conflict and shows conflict. It just seemed the natural place.
Have you got any particular, do you make any differentiation between its physical placement in this main exhibition space and in the atrium in Lambeth Road?
Well, it couldn't be more different really. I mean, in London, it's surrounded by, like these people have said, by all this machinery.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, it's dramatically lit by itself, and it's more of a, what the word is, it's like it's obviously a key exhibit, but there's the film show that goes on around it as well. So it's given a lot more precedence, really. I think Robert used it in a more activist way, which is what I was trying not to use. When I had the car, I didn't want to use it in such a way that he did. But we did, it was mentioned, it was referred to, because it was part of its history in the West, as it were, what happened to it once its provenance, really, if you want to look at it in those terms, once it came to Europe. So yes, we did. But he used it in a very specific way, and I used the car when I got it in a very specific way, but they were quite different. To me personally, it doesn't matter that they're from Almutanabi Street. Obviously, that was a particularly nasty bomb attack. It was a particularly vicious bomb attack, and it has all these other meanings associated with it because it was a bomb attack in a book market and a cultural area, which of course people might expect myself or people who like art and literature and culture to be more interested in, but it was by chance that the car had come from that in terms of the way we got it. So it was just by chance. It could have, to be honest, it could have come from any event in Iraq, any explosion, any bombing attack in Iraq.
If it had been known that a particular group or a particular army or a particular individual had set it off, would it have overcomplicated things?
It would be, not really. I think it would have been a problem if it had been from an American attack. That could have been a problem. Showing Americans that might have led to problems for us. But we basically got what we were given. So that's really it.
There's an idea here that because of the significance that people bring to them in the United States, in Amsterdam as part of a peace protest, in a war museum with a connection to a contemporary artist, is that more important?
I don't think so, no. I think when people walk into a space, they see well, they might not even recognise that it's a badly damaged car, a bombed car, but that's the starting point of anybody's engagement. And I think what other people have done with that and the way it's been used and what we do with it are all interesting elements of it. But if you lose the immediacy of your relationship with it as an object that is historical evidence, then it starts to fail as a museum display.
Whereas the car, I think, discomforts that kind of premise and that form of presentation, because it does show exactly what explosives do in a way, although it stops well short of giving an account of the humanity, the humaneness of that. And I think that's a shame. I think that we need to know who died in the car, near the car. We need to know their names.
Do you work here?
Otherwise, you see, the danger is we just fall along the side of the invaders who don't want us to know. They want us to believe that the bombing in that street was irrational. We don't know who did it. For
Tim,
reason.
can I just... I would say that nobody did claim responsibility for that incident, and therefore we can't give those levels of information.
You wouldn't want to give responsibility though, would you?
Well, I mean,
It'd be quite weird if you said what we think as an Imperial War Museum was these people.
You know, there is. I'm aware that when I have time, I will need to do more digging around this and try and get more out of the story. Have we, you know, presented it as an irrational act on the part of the people who committed it? I don't think people have reasons for doing what they do, but without knowing who the people are, it would be conjecture on our part. Have we given the impression that they're irrational? Well, if we have, I think that's probably a mistake, or I would agree that's a mistake.
From the beginning, when I did this, or had the idea for the plinth, right from the beginning, it was always meant to be a very difficult, absurd, stupid, wrong thing to do, really, to put this thing on display in public in the UK, and then even more so taking it around America. There's something totally inappropriate about it, which is why I wanted to do it, and provocative. And I hope that still is the case here, but maybe less so now. Now it's within it, but it has a safe home. But that was something I was interested in. So that's it, really. The sort of the wrongness of it was something that interested me, and especially doing it in London, in public.
Okay. Roger, any final comment?
Well, I think just there's a whole lot more to be said and to be thought about in terms of the car. And that for us as a museum, you know, we start that journey, and I think what we should be judged on as an institution, in a sense, is what we're saying in 5 years' time, rather than and how we're building up our understanding and of the story around the car and how we interpret it.